Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'll give you a quick pitch. I'm trying to shift this channel to talk a little bit more about film photography and old cameras and basically just a bunch of stuff that I find fascinating. So if any of that interests you, I encourage you to subscribe. It's my way of trying to give back to the film community here on YouTube. And at the very least, if you could give this video a thumbs up, I'd appreciate it because it does help other people who would find this content interesting find this video. All right, let's get into it. If you saw my last video, then you would know that I picked up the Pentax PC35AF from a thrift shop. The pros and cons of a thrift shop, obviously, you don't know the camera's previous owner, you don't know any history about the camera, and most of the time you don't even know if the camera turns on or not until you get home. Having said all of that, much like the Nikon F80 that I had before this camera, if you didn't see that video, I'll link it below, or you can click through my channel to go check it out. I got super lucky with this, and I feel like everything's working perfectly fine except for one little thing that I'll get into when we get to that photo. Otherwise, today I'm going to show you guys the scans as I got them back from the lab. Normally, I do home camera scanning because I like to have that extra flexibility, but due to time restraints and being a little bit too busy recently, I decided to go with lab scans. And it's a roll of Kodak ColorPlus 200. And it's the first time I've shot Kodak ColorPlus 200. I've seen Kyle McDougall go through a few rolls, and what he did looked really nice. You'll see when we get into the scans that I decided to shoot the roll at box speed, which, for those of you who know me, is kind of rare. Normally, I like to give my film a little extra stop of light, or I like to push it a bit. But since I had never shot Kodak ColorPlus 200 before, I wanted to shoot it at box speed for a couple of reasons. One was to have a benchmark of what it should look like. And then two was to see if the meter and everything in the camera was working perfectly, which I feel like I wouldn't get a good idea of if I pushed or pulled or overexposed my film. I think that's enough rambling. Let me pull up the scans. All right, here's the first shot on the roll. It's this old abandoned train station that my buddy and I found on a drive to Toronto. It might look familiar to you if you saw the other Nikon video that I had posted, but I was testing both cameras on that day. I could have probably spent over an hour or two at this spot. There's just something I really enjoyed about the liminal space and the way that the tones looked. I really like the look of the overcast day and the sort of yellow brownish dead grass everywhere. The whole kind of just like fits the whole vibe of the desolate abandoned train station. For a first shot on the roll, I was super happy to see that the exposure looks okay. The photo looks about as sharp as I was expecting for a lab scan. And I mean, it's about as sharp as I was expecting for that camera too. Second shot on the roll. This is the little mechanical thing that I was talking about. I've only shot the one roll on this camera, so I don't know if this happens every time, but it did happen when I was testing the camera, just like tinkering with it. And then it happened again when I had a roll film in it. But basically, after I shot the first frame, I advanced the film to the next frame and the shutter popped. So that's what happened here. I definitely did not take this terrible photo of the roof of the building. This is as I was walking into my next frame, the shutter popped and I got this. I don't know. I'm going to see if I can actually just recreate it right here. No, seems to be fine right now, of course. Anyways, hopefully that's just an anomaly. Maybe it's because the camera hadn't been used for a while. If anyone out there knows more about this camera or has repaired this camera or this specific issue before, please let me know in the comments if this is something that you think I can fix on my own. Or if not, if you're willing to service it, please reach out, because if it does this on every roll, it's going to be a little bit annoying. I framed this shot almost exactly the same in my Nikon F80 video. I just like the framing a lot to have like the leading lines and all the negative space on top. I don't know if I like it better in black and white or in color. The shots came out quite similar. I think I'm leaning towards the color one. It's just a little bit more interesting to have the two tone of the desolate woods and the dead grass in the foreground. This little abandoned convenience store is in it's outside it's near Sandbanks somewhere. I remember pulling off the highway and finding this place. I did shoot this place last summer in color infrared, which is a part of another video that I'll show you guys someday. But I really loved how this garage or gas station convenience store has been pretty much left intact for the most part. They still have the sign up. It's not destroyed with graffiti. I mean, same as the train station before it, not destroyed with graffiti, which is pretty amazing the considering how often these things get tagged up like crazy. This shot here was the first time that I tried using the backlight button. I don't think I used it on the one before. Definitely used it on this one because I remember pointing at the sun and thinking like, oh, hey, this is a great opportunity to try that. I think I like the framing a little bit better on the wide shot versus the portrait one. So I might just straighten this one a little bit. There we go. I like that shot quite a bit. This one after it's the first time that the camera missed focus. And I remember I was trying to get a little bit more of a lens flare on that one. Didn't really work out. But yeah, it's a shame that this one missed focus because I like the framing of this one a lot better. I like having more headroom at the top and just a little bit more balance in the frame. It's a little bit less busy. This shot of the car. Oh man. Okay, so this is the first time we see a bit of a weird lens flare. There's like a bit of an edge, a weird vertical edge to the side there, which I guess if you cropped it wouldn't be as bad. I guess not as offensive to just do something like that. And this shot, yeah, seems like maybe I should have used, I don't think I used the backlight button on this one, but maybe I should have. I still kind of like the shot though. This one of the barns, or it's the same spot. I was kind of just looking for a slightly different frame on my way to shoot the next shot, which I remember checking is out of focus, and it's so upsetting. I thought this shot would be my keeper of this little location that we stopped at. I think I guess this one is maybe my favorite of the three now because this shot's out of focus. If this shot was in focus, I think this would be my favorite one of the three. However, I'm kind of liking the framing of this one. I like the way that the electrical lines kind of lead your eye on the top right, and I liked having the layers of the two barns, and even the fact that the camera shot at what I'm guessing is a deeper f-stop. It almost looks like an f8 or f11 on that one. But yeah, coming back and getting a shot like this out of focus is definitely one of those moments where you regret not shooting more. And even worse is I regret not paying more attention to the little autofocus meter that's in the viewfinder because I know that I rushed this shot and I should have been looking at that. But what you don't see from this photo, what's not conveyed to the viewer, is that although there's not that much snow on the ground, it was freezing out at this spot. I'm from Montreal and I'm used to cold weather. This spot felt like minus 35, minus 40 degrees Celsius easily, because what you don't see in the photo is the cold wind that was blowing. So that's why I rushed this shot. That's why I didn't notice the autofocus meter was off, is because it was so goddamn cold that I just wanted to get back into the car. And it's too bad because that shot would have been a keeper. And I think the other thing that I would have done differently was knowing that that other barn is just to the right out of frame, is maybe I would have incorporated some of that just to have that extra foreground element, and maybe have the shot have a little bit more layers to it, a little bit more depth, and it would have framed the car nicely. For privacy reasons, I'm just going to skip past a couple of family photos here. I can attest to you that they turned out all right and that the flash works really well indoors. I remember using the backlight button on this shot because I wanted to try to get a little bit more bloom from the sun hitting the snow, and it seems like it worked pretty well. The ColorPlus 200 held on pretty well to the highlights. Maybe they're on the fringe of being blown out, but I'm sure I can bring those down just a little bit if I really wanted to. And the tone of this image is just beautiful. I love the golden light. I like the way that the colors of the forest came through. Color Plus is looking pretty good to me. Here's an instance where I saw a shot and I couldn't quite get the frame that I wanted. I didn't really like the fact that there was a van in the background. I wasn't excited about the tree at the top right coming in. So it's one of those cases where, because I couldn't get the distracting elements out of the frame, I was trying to then lean into them. You'll notice that this shot is a little bit out of focus in any case, but the framing is not exactly what I wanted anyways. So this one bums me out a little bit less. This one was me trying to accept the fact that there are some distracting elements in the frame. So as opposed to trying to crop the van out when I couldn't get it out, or trying to crop the tree out when I couldn't get it out, I decided to just make them part of the composition. And I feel like it, as a photo, it works a little bit better. For one, it's in focus. And then secondly, it still does what I wanted to do. Like, your eyes still kind of go to the subject in the same way. One of the things that I'm always conscious about when shooting film is that because it's this medium that has a nostalgic vibe to it, that has something that, just inherently makes everything feel and look a little bit older, is I try to gear my subject matter towards things that are a little bit older, like the old car, the abandoned train station. In this case, Al's Liquors. No offense to Al, I'm sorry, but your storefront has this older vibe to it. And when you see a modern vehicle or some kind of modern building in the background, generally speaking, that can often be enough for me to not take the photo in the first place. But one of the things that I've come to realize is that that van that's in the background that bothers me, it doesn't look old yet. But one day I might come back to this frame and I'm going to look at this and I'm going to go, oh, look how old that car is in the background. It's just one of those things, right? Like, you can't predict when that feeling is going to happen. You can't know for sure that it is going to happen. But I like to think that I'd rather take the shot, and then maybe one day the whole photo will just feel more nostalgic for me. So, as a message to everybody else out there that feels the same way, when you have a distracting modern element in the frame or something that you don't like in the frame, it shouldn't necessarily mean don't take the photo. Because for me, there's been dozens of times in my life that I didn't take a photo because of one little thing that bothered me. And looking back, like, maybe I would have rather taken the photo anyways. Here's another example of something that I was trying to photograph that had that nostalgic old look to me. It was this place with this old propane sign. It's basically, I don't know what this place is, like a junkyard or something. This guy collects like a bunch of old stuff, old signage. And again, I was trying to frame out some distracting elements on the left. There was a car parked over there. There's another part of a building that I didn't like too much. And I was trying to use the median as like a foreground element to help frame everything. I think this shot kind of works, but it doesn't exactly have the composition that I was going for. And this one, again, doesn't quite have the composition I was going for. I think maybe with the right lighting at a different time of day or different weather, these shots could have worked a little bit better. Maybe this shot shooting from where I was on the other side of the street would have worked better with like a 50 mm lens or something, just to be able to frame out some of those distracting elements. Okay, this shot of the birds in the sky. This is something that I try to do quite often. I've had it on a few occasions where there's a big flock of birds overhead. What I was hoping for, there's this book by, I can't remember the photographer's name. He's quite a popular photographer because I've seen this book in several bookstores now, but he had a bunch of landscape photography with birds, and specifically birds in motion. If any of you know who it is that I'm talking about, feel free to remind me in the comments. But that's what I was hoping that I was going to get with this shot, because I remember specifically the time of day that I took this photo. It was, like late afternoon, overcast. I was anticipating that the camera was going to meter for the sky and drag the shutter or something, but it didn't. And I was hoping that more of the birds would have like a motion blur on their wings, or maybe almost like a double exposure, but it didn't quite work out like that. In the end, I'm also a little bit bummed about having those trees in the bottom left corner there. I would maybe find this shot a little bit more interesting to just crop out some of the things that I find distracting and go with a frame that's more like that. Again, not that it's like a portfolio shot or anything. This building I shot on the Kent mirror roll in the Nikon as well, so you might recognize that if you saw that video. By centering the door like this, I was just kind of doing what I consider to be a lazy Wes Anderson composition. Sometimes these shots work out really well, and other times you get them back and they're kind of bland. But this one, if you could picture it at the right time of day, the sun might hit this canopy on top and create some nice angular lighting or shadows. Would have been kind of cool. So I think it's just a matter of going back there at the right time of day. Here's another shot that's out of focus, unfortunately. And I guess now I'm starting to realize, again, this is only the first roll that I've put through this camera, but now I'm starting to see a bit of a theme here. It's that the other shot that missed focus had a very intense backlight. And this shot is out of focus and has a very intense backlight because the sun is shining off the building in the background. So I think that's something that might be a little bit of a recurring theme with this camera, is that it might struggle to focus in really intense, bright situations. It wasn't a shot that I cared so much about that I would have necessarily wanted to have a second frame of this, because I think this one's a little bit underwhelming. But if I really did take my time and keep an eye on that autofocus meter at the bottom, it's something that I'm still kind of getting used to, because it's the only camera that I have that has that kind of a focusing metering system on it. I think I could probably avoid situations like this in the future. This one here with the octopus arm sticking out of the building, I had a bit of a hard time finding a frame that worked with this lens. I did shoot this and I like the shots better on the Nikon when I was there on the same day. These ones, I was trying to incorporate a little bit of like the street in the foreground of the composition, and I feel like it failed. It ended up just being a very distracting element to have this little box here. And I think maybe this is an instance that I should have not taken this photo, not because of a distracting element that like a modern vehicle or something, but just because the composition was pretty bad. So that one's quite disappointing. I quite like this photo. I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. I would maybe do, apart from straightening it a little bit, I'm tempted to just readjust my crop. Definitely the shot benefits from being straightened, because I'm not a fan of slightly crooked shots. I like Dutch angles when it's intentional, and I like a Dutch angle when the shot is meant to feel casual and candid. But when it's something like this with so many lines that you've got a horizon, you've got angles that lead your eye to a certain area, I think these are shots where it really does pay to take the time to adjust your composition appropriately. And I also think that the nature of a point and shoot, you're trying to capture something that happens really quick, right? Like this guy on the bicycle on the right side of the frame. He's coming up the street quick. I didn't have a lot of time to frame the shot if I wanted him in it. And if he wasn't in the shot, I feel like the frame would be kind of boring. It's one of those situations where a cyclist or having a person in your shot actually gives your photo a little bit more of an interesting composition. This shot, I'm just, at this point, I'm just trying to get through the roll a little bit quicker. It's just, I saw this one as a little bit more of testing how this camera works as an everyday travel or pocket camera. And, for sharpness on the buildings, everything's looking pretty good. The lens doesn't have much of a vignette. There is a little bit for sure, but it's not as bad as what we've seen in copies of the Lomo MC. And just a tiny little old car. I'm just going to adjust the composition, crop out that unwanted element. And that's okay. Definitely not a portfolio shot, but it's a shot of an old car. This shot, I really don't know what I was thinking. In the past, when I've shot old cars, I tend to just like look for details on them that I find fascinating, like headlights or grills or the tires. And in this instance, I think not much to say about this one. I don't really like it. Even if I change the crop, it's not really my vibe. There's not too much going on here that I care for. The lighting's pretty flat, subject's pretty flat. Even if this was at a different time of day, I find the billboard a little bit distracting. It's the kind of thing where if the billboard was a little bit more interesting, maybe the shot could play, but I also kind of cropped it a bit weird, so let's move on. This one is for you, Jason. If you're unfamiliar, there's a photographer on YouTube, goes by the name Grainy Days. He's fascinated with taking photos of toilets, and I have to admit, some of that has rubbed off on me in a way that I'm not super proud of and I don't fully understand. But once in a while, I have come across a toilet that just begs to be photographed, and this was one of them. The one thing that bothers me, though, is this little can of Lysol in the corner. If this was digital, I would probably comp it out. But in this case, I think I would just crop it. This shot definitely does benefit from a little bit of transform tool just to get the lines a little bit straighter, because sometimes that kind of stuff bothers me, especially when you have a composition that has so much liminal space, and I can find it quite distracting to have lines that aren't straight when they should be straight. But that's totally subjective, and I know there are people out there that would just leave the photo alone, and I think that's fine too. This photo I kind of like for a reason I can't really put my finger on. It's I think I took this inside of a Walmart that was just recently renovated. There's a lot of symmetry going on here, and my framing is just a little bit off to have it totally symmetrical. I'm gonna see if I can just get there with just a little bit of a crop and a rotation. But I feel like it definitely helps to have those leading lines just a little bit more symmetrical. This shot for me kind of works, plays. I don't really know what it is I like about the shot. If you want to get overly analytical about it, I guess you could make some observation about the overly stocked shelves and the empty aisles. That's a stark contrast. But the frame also kind of makes me think a little bit of the pandemic because of that look of an empty aisle and such a big, bright store. The contrast, obviously, though, is that in the pandemic, the shelves would have been pretty empty, and here they're not. And I can't show you these in full because they were behind the scenes photos of a video that is not out yet. So we'll have to just skip past these real quick. So that was my first roll through this camera, and honestly, I was quite surprised. I had a bunch of photos that I would consider to be keepers that I would be more than happy to post on social media. I wouldn't say they're going to be portfolio shots. They're not going to be in a book or anything that I care about, but it gave me a really good idea of how this camera performs. And it has taught me that I have to pay a lot more attention to that little autofocus meter at the bottom. But again, that's a feature that I'm very happy this camera has, because most point and shoot cameras don't have anything like that. Like the Canons and the other, I have another Pentax point and shoot camera in my collection, and they don't have that feature. So being able to look through the viewfinder, half press your shutter, and see where your focus is going to be is a feature that is much appreciated on a point and shoot camera. And it's going to take a bit of programming in my brain to remember to look at that a little bit more often and to not just pull it out on a whim and shoot, shoot, shoot. Because as I've seen, it's going to result in a few frames that are out of focus. And there's nothing more disappointing than getting your film back from the lab and finding photos that are completely unusable. I also really appreciate that this camera has the backlight feature on here, because that's something that my other point and shoots don't have. It's got a self timer that I actually don't think I tested, but when I was fiddling with the camera beforehand, it seems like it worked fine. I really like that the photos, as I've seen them so far in the scans, look quite sharp. That's something that I don't know if I really expected from a lens of this caliber. I didn't look at what this camera retailed for originally. See if we can find that. According to the internet, this camera retailed for an original price of around $200 to $300 US. It's definitely not like at the bottom tier of point and shoot cameras, but for what it is, I think you actually got a pretty good bang for your buck, because this camera does have features that are missing from other point and shoots. There's another thing that this camera does that a lot of other point and shoots don't do, and that's when you're going to take a photo, if there's any risk of underexposure, the camera warns you with an audible beep. So you'll see if I point it at my light here, everything's fine. There's no film in here. But if I was to, say, cover the lens, you can hear that beep. That's the camera telling me that I'm risking underexposure. And it's a good way of knowing whether or not maybe you should be putting the camera on a tripod or using the self-timer on a tripod or something to reduce those chances of having another photo that's completely unusable. Another thing that I did appreciate on this camera that I would like to play around a little bit more with is the fact that you can manually select your ISO from ISO 25, 50 to 100 to 200, 400, as well as there's even little markings in between if you wanted to be really precise about it. I think that's a pretty cool feature to have that gives the user a lot more flexibility and choice in how you're exposing your film and what you're doing with it. I think if there's one thing Pentax could have done differently at the time, would have been to just build the camera out of metal. It's a very plasticky camera, but if they had made this out of metal back in the day, maybe this would be up there with the Contax T2 on a regular basis. At the moment, it seems like only the people who know about it and who know how awesome it is, or now maybe some people who've seen this video will know how awesome this camera is. And it's rare to find a point and shoot camera with so many manual settings, or to find a camera that gives the user so much control. So I know I only shot the one roll, but I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on this camera, and my personal recommendation is that if you have a few bucks to spare, go on eBay and grab one of these for yourself right now, because maybe one day some influencer will show up on TikTok or some talk show with one of these in hand, and they might one day be very, very difficult to find. So I'm almost done editing this video, and then I realized that there were two things that I should interject and explain. One of them was that despite the few shots that I had that were out of focus, I did still highly praise this camera and ultimately recommend it. And I just want to clarify that those shots that were out of focus, that is what I would define as user error. And I'm sure that the more that I shoot with this camera, the less likely that's going to happen in the future. So the title and the thumbnail, it's not clickbait. This camera is definitely going to become one of my daily carry point and shoot cameras. And the other thing was that if there are some of you who are shopping for one of these cameras, maybe you already decided you were going to get one before you saw my video, or maybe my video made you decide to look into it. Eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed that I had two cameras, two of these on my desk. One was the one that I got from the thrift shop. The other one was the one that I had from my father that's broken. But I actually have three of them, and that's because one of them is one that my father got to replace his camera when it broke. And what I wanted to point out was that on that third one, there's one thing that's very, very different that people buying these cameras should be aware of, and that is that on that one, which I think it's this one. I don't know how well you guys will be able to see this. on that third one, the bottom of the camera says Hong Kong, whereas the other two, this is my father's broken one, says Asahi, Japan, and the thrift shop one says Asahi, Japan. And so I know that a lot of the times with cameras, it can be a lot like guitars, where those that are made in certain countries might be more valuable than others, or the quality control might shift over time. So as far as I can tell, I researched it a little bit. These Pentaxes all seem to be functionally the same, but buyers should be conscious of the fact that the made in Japan ones should have a slightly higher price tag, and some sellers might be selling a Hong Kong version and trying to get that higher price tag. So I just don't want people to be out there overpaying for maybe a Hong Kong version. That being said, maybe the recommendation would be to consider the Hong Kong one. If everything is indeed functionally the same, you might be able to acquire one of these cameras a little bit cheaper.